This is our 14th session, and our topic today is push, pull, and drag methods. We'll get into that a lot more deeply in a minute, but let's go to the next slide and just make sure that everybody is set up here for how these work. I think most of the names I'm seeing have been involved in calls before, but there's a couple new ones here, so I appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are. This call is going to be moderated by John McClellan. He's Minnesota DOT Freeway Operations Supervisor. John has moderated other calls for us before. John's part of our steering committee, and I got to tell you, on that committee, he's passionate about topics. That's why he keeps getting selected as moderator, John. So we appreciate your experience and your willingness to walk us through this topic today. Also on the call with me, this is Sam McLean, by the way, and also on the call from my company, Travelers Marketing and SafeHighways.org, is Liz LaBelle. Liz is instrumental in making all this come together. She's got a bit of a cold today, so I'm going to talk a little more than usual and try to save her throat a bit. And this industry association, this network, is sort of housed now with NOCoE, National Operations Center of Excellence. And we have Nilu on the call with us as well, who's making all the things you see on screen happen. So thank you, Nilu. And if you want to go ahead to the next slide. That's me, Sam McLean. I'll take a minute here just to explain sort of my dual role, my two hats here. My daytime job is Vice President of Sponsorship at Travelers Marketing. So in that role, I got to work with a lot of you, primarily on sponsorship of your patrols, but over the past 10, 11 years now, I've learned a lot about safety service patrols, and that's sort of what helped launch this organization, just realizing there needed to be a place for all of you to share information and best practices and just talk to one another. So that's why we've created this this network. Try to keep a distinction between the sponsorship work and this idea sharing network. So just if anyone was confused, sort of wear two hats, as does Liz on this. All right, enough about me. Let's get into a bit. Go ahead, Nilu, about what to do here today. So if you haven't already, please mute your phones. We often get background conversations and things that can be very distracting, so appreciate that. And if you are dialing in by phone, make sure your computers are not also on. We get a lot of feedback. One of these calls we learned early on, if you place us on hold and you have hold music, sometimes we hear that. So if you do need to step away or take another call, try not to put this one on hold. Although I think we're muting all of that out now. But as I mentioned earlier, I appreciate if you sign in with your organization so that everybody knows who's who here. And as questions come up, etc., we can reference the area and the person's name and such. So thank you for that. We will make what you see here today available for you to download, and that's at safehighways.org. If you haven't been to safehighways.org, I really encourage you to go there. We've had all of the past webinars housed there, as well as a chart of the patrols around the country. We'd love for you to update us with your patrol information if it's somewhat outdated on there. Take a peek at that. And we're really just trying to create a portal for the safety service patrol industry. So if you want to share information, if you have a standard operating procedure manual that you want to share out with other states, you'll find some of those on that site. So we're trying to grow the site to be somewhat of a house or library for safety service patrol information that you guys want to share with amongst each other. So please visit us there if you haven't already, or even if you haven't, go check it out again. Go ahead, Nilu. This is your network. I'm not an expert on this stuff. You guys are. We would love to hear from you and have you participate in today's discussion. Obviously, we have planned presentations, and at the end of each, we'll have a little opportunity for you to ask questions of the presenter, and then depending on how much time is left at the end of all of these presentations, we have 5 presentations today, so we're going to move through them. Whatever time's left at the end is your time to ask whatever questions you might not have gotten into, but different ways for you to get your question in. If you want to do it live, you can just raise your hand. You'll see that little icon up at the top with the little person with their hand up, and then unmute your phone if you've muted it. The other option is to type in a question in the chat box as well. And we've got some people, Liz and Nilu, who will be looking for those questions, and then we can read them off for you to the presenters, okay? So we definitely want to hear from you. It's meant to be interactive, sometimes tough to do on a national call with 30, 40 people, but we definitely want to hear from you and make sure that we're addressing your questions directly. All right, let's move ahead. I think everybody knows the objective of these sessions here. Basically, most everyone on this call is either a Safety Service Patrol manager or maybe somebody from FHWA who works with the patrols. So it's really it's our group. It's our people that do this day in and day out. Thank you for the work that you do. I think it's life-saving work, and I greatly appreciate all the efforts that goes into these patrols. I know there's a lot of passion around the Safety Service Patrols, and I love that part of it, and I appreciate you taking some time away today to sharpen the saw, as they say, and learn a little bit from your fellow managers in other states. We'd love to have you present. It's ssp@safehighways.org. If you want to volunteer some topic ideas, or there's something going on in your state you think we should share with other states, we'd love that. If you have further questions or suggestions for these webinars or the group in general, please send us an email, ssp@safehighways.org. Go ahead, Neela. Liz and I are sort of the coordinators of these calls, these webinars, but the information that you're going to hear is primarily comes through our steering committee members. We generally have 4, so we have an opening now if anybody does want to get more involved. The steering committee basically will get together once or twice a month, talk about the past call, what was good, what can we do better, and then obviously start planning the next call. So Jason Josie out of Georgia DOT, the HERO manager there, Todd Lease is not able to be with us today, Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission, and of course John McClellan is going to be our moderator. So if you want to get more involved, I don't think, John, it takes that much time, does it?
No,
I'm trying to keep it to a minimum.
Yeah, it's all good.
We appreciate your time. Okay, let's go. Let's move ahead. This is what we're going to talk about today. We're past the introduction part here. Once I get through this, wanted to give you an industry association update. So we've talked about the Safety Service Patrol Industry Association on these past calls, and we're going to just give you a little update of what's going on there today, and then we'll get into our topic, push, pull, and drag. And we've got, as I mentioned, 5 presenters. You see their names here and what states they're from, representing, etc. You can ask questions at the end of each, and then, as I said, whatever time is left, we will put up some surveys for you to help us pick what the next topic should be about, and then any closing remarks or any questions anybody has that we didn't get to. So let's step into that topic now. Jason Josie from Georgia is really chairing the Safety Service Patrol Industry Association, along with his day job here of being the HERO manager there. But Jason was not able to be with us here at the last minute. He asked me if I would cover the industry update. So for those that don't know, Safety Service Patrol Industry Association, SSPIA, is really just starting up this year, 2019. A few states got together to say, hey, there's probably some things we can do to advocate on behalf of Safety Service Patrols across the country. And so they're just starting up that organization. There's 2 newsletters available. If you haven't seen those, I'm leaving Jason's email address up here. You can email Jason or me, and we'll get you hooked up into this association. Like I say, it's somewhat of grassroots right now. Still trying to get our legs under us to figure out how we can be of best help to the industry. But the update for this call is really about a pooled fund study. We're applying to FHWA to develop a pooled fund study for Safety Service Patrols. There has been one in the past, maybe some of you participated in. For those that don't know, pooled fund studies, basically the states will pool funds, put money in from each state, and then that money will be used to do further research. The topic here is primarily going to be best practices and industry, trying to establish industry standards. So first thing we're going to do is identify common issues amongst all the states, who's got some best practices that solve those, and then move to develop those as industry standards, I think is somewhat of what the pooled fund study is going to look at. Obviously, once we get it started, it may go into different directions of need, but primarily the focus is on training and standard operating procedures. So we'd love to have as many states involved as possible in that. I think the initial ask is between 10 and 20,000 per state, and it'll probably be, I would imagine, about a year-long study. So love to have your participation. Again, just send an email to jjosie@dot.ga.gov, or you can send it to me at smclain@travelersmarketing.com. Some of you already have that in your email address list, so we'll be glad to have you as part of that. So it's exciting work that's happening with a small group of volunteers that are really just trying to help the Safety Service Patrol industry get more established and maybe have a voice that's a little larger than any of us individually can have. So I think it's a worthy endeavor, and I think it's going to work well with what we're doing on these calls. These calls are primarily best practice sharing. This association, I think, can speak on behalf of the Safety Service Patrols around the country, maybe at a Washington, D.C. or FHWA level. So a little bit of different objective. I think both are needed. So that is Jason's update given by Sam here of that association, but love to have more people start to get involved. Any questions on that before I move to John? Seeing and hearing none, let's get right into our topic here with our moderator. I mentioned John McClellan has done this before for us. He's from Minnesota DOT. So John, I'm just going to turn it to you at this point, and let's teach us some things.
All right, thanks, Sam. Really appreciate, and thanks for your work on this. Yeah, John McClellan, Minnesota DOT, been here since 2002, and supervisor for last 10 years in the freeway ops side. You can go to the next slide, Nilo. So what we're talking about today is, it's kind of nitty-gritty basics of what a lot of us do as their day-to-day response is trying to get stuff out of the lanes, try to get it off the right-of-way, try to at least get it to the shoulder. So what are some of the strategies and some of the tactics that we do for that? And just throwing out that just kind of up front, this isn't necessarily about it's beyond what you would do with a tow truck. This is the tactics, I guess, other than what you would use a traditional tow for. Part of that recognizing that there's a lot of service patrols that aren't running tow trucks, and even the ones that do run tow trucks, a lot of them don't necessarily even use a tow in a conventional manner like that. A lot of the states with state employees aren't in tows, and it becomes a huge political thing. So what we're really looking at is strategies beyond what a simple tow or what a tow truck would do. Next slide. So this is kind of a basic kind of a summary of what I could think of, and I think in our discussions amongst the group as far as what some of the strategies are. Pushing, I mean, that's kind of, I won't say basic, but that's kind of one of the starting point that a lot of us go out with. Service patrol gets behind the vehicle. You tell the civilian to put their car in neutral, and you push them. The driver remains, the civilian remains in control of steering and braking. And that's kind of like your 101 as far as getting things cleared. Some states, instead of pushing, they do a pull. They pull in front of the vehicle, they hook up a chain or a tow rope. Same thing, vehicles in neutral, civilian remains in control of steering and braking, get it to the shoulder that way. I know from Minnesota we do that occasionally if it's like an overheight vehicle, a school bus, a dock truck, something like that. We'll do that, and in a few cases we've done both a push and a pull if it's like a really heavy semi or something like that. One truck pulling and one truck pushing. An interesting one for number 3, and this is just, some of you got a better way to call it, that's great, but you're pulling it, but and I've heard this, I know I heard this from at least one state that this is what they did, is that they pull it, but they tell the driver, the civilian driver, to put the car in park, set the emergency brake, and they're basically dragging the vehicle to the shoulder. And then that way, the idea that you're minimizing the chances that the FSP driver remains in control of where the car goes. You're minimizing the chances that they're going to do something crazy, that the civilian's going to do something. So that's an interesting approach to it. I'm kind of curious to hear from the states that do that. It seems like I could see some objections from the public on that. I'm interested to hear, and hopefully the states that do that are present on the call and to get their input on it. It's an interesting idea. And then the last one, I'd say this is kind of the holy grail that I know I would like to see us be able to get to, and I'm sure, I imagine there's some states that are out there. Same thing, that by any means necessary, you get that thing out of the lane and you drag it, you push it, you flip it over, you drag it onto roof, whatever, you get the thing out of the lane. And ultimately, the priority is getting the lanes cleared and causing additional damage to the cargo, to the truck. That is a low concern. So how do you get to that? I mean, not only the tactics of how you actually do it, but if you're a state that does that, how did you get to that? And certainly the legislative stuff will be helpful. Other things, tire dollies, I'll show a little video of that, something we were doing in Minnesota. And I guess if you've got other stuff, if you're on the call and there's something that you're doing that doesn't get brought up today and you want to present it on the next one, or if you want to say something today about it, these webinars are for us and by us. So please, if you've got a good idea and you want to talk about it, bring it up for sure. And we can even, or if it's something we can do in the next webinar, that's what this is for. Next slide. And hopefully, maybe see if you get the video to work, I guess. And videos are always a little bit of a challenge, so hopefully this will play. Hey. And if it does play, hopefully it's a smooth video and you're able to see the whole thing at home or in the office. I'm not seeing it on my side, Nilo, so I'm not sure if it's working or not. I just got a black screen.
Okay, just a second. I'm just putting it up.
So the vehicle here has a broken tie rod or broken axle, broken front tires. So dragging it would be a problem, would cause additional damage. Waiting for a tow truck is going to be an amount of time. Driver, our guy, and this is something that he came up with himself for the most part. He's jacking up with a floor jack, and he's going to put a tire dolly under that broken front wheel. And that's what he's in the process of doing right now.
So is the video coming up now?
It's pretty jumpy. I'm not really getting and then it just froze up there. So I think we can, just in the interest of time, we can keep going. I think that's all right. That's basically what the idea was for the folks at home. What he was doing. Then he's able to push that vehicle by hand, just give it a little push by hand and get it off to the shoulder and get the lanes are clear. That's pretty innovative, a pretty cool idea. So, questions for the presenters who are talking today, and for the folks listening in the audience. If you're doing this stuff, what kind of training do your operators have specific to these tactics of getting things clear? Is it all on the job? Are you looking for previous towers? And if you're getting towers, are you requiring them to go through RecMaster or something like that? What's your level of training? Do you limit what tactics your folks are able to do based off of some sort of skill level or assessment, or even like a job classification? Like, say for one, you're a level 1 SSP driver, you can only push, you've been around for 6 months or a year and you've taken the classes, now you're a level 2 and now you can drag. Are you doing something like that? I'm kind of curious to do that for ourselves. For the folks who are doing a lot of dragging of vehicles, if you're doing that drag approach, how do you deal with the public? I mean, just just up front with the public, how are you dealing with them and being afraid you're going to wreck their car or wreck their tires? And then really the big one for the more aggressive things, the by any means necessary, the legislative exemption, I assume. So would be certainly like to hopefully hear more about that today too for the states who are doing that and how you got to it and some of the background on that. Special equipment, chains, ropes, snatch blocks, winches, what kind of things are you doing that you think are really helpful and useful that we can all learn from? Next slide. All right, introduction. That was it for me. So introduction of Mr. David. Keith David, Rapid Response Team Leader, Colorado Department of Transportation. In this role, Mr. David works with safety patrol operators in his area at incidents along with the Ops Center at the Eisenhower Johnson Memorial Tunnels. Prior to his current role, he worked with Incident Clear as a safety patrol operator in Colorado. He also has a background in firefighting. He was a firefighter in the U.S. Army Reserves, including a year deployment to Iraq, and he was a volunteer firefighter in his hometown back in Pennsylvania. Thank you for your service, and thank you, Mr. David.
Thank you. Elo, if you could go to the next slide. So this slide talks about Colorado's Move It law. Basically says vehicles that are drivable and safe to drive, by law, the driver has to move them off of the highway. Most people take that to mean the shoulder, but it can also mean a parking lot, ramp, whatever. Failure to do so, if the cop chooses to, they can cite them with a Class 2 misdemeanor. This is the law that I personally use, and I know several other people have used to make vehicles that are heavily damaged drive a mile or more. In my case, I think the most I've had a vehicle drive with a broken radiator that rear-ended someone was about 5 miles. It's not pretty, it's not ugly, the car's not happy, but it is the law, and we usually will have someone follow them. If, Nilo, you could go to the second slide. So this is our authority removal law. It's mostly focused around law enforcement agency employees, such as myself, can fall under it. We have the contracted safety patrols fall under it as well by a matter of procedure. Some cases, and I'll get to that later on in my presentation, the contracted companies prefer to have law enforcement direct them to do certain things because of the increased likelihood of damage to the vehicles. It does include indemnity clause so long as we can show that we did everything reasonable and by industry best practices to reduce the amount of damage caused. It's no harm, no foul on our part because we had to open up the highway again. If you could go to the next slide. So we have 2 contracted safety patrol areas. We have one that covers pretty much the whole Front Range now from a little north of Pueblo all the way up to Fort Collins along I-25. Most of the trucks are in the Denver area. I believe they have roughly 30 trucks at peak time between the whole metro area. We also have our Mountain Courtesy Patrol, which is where I currently am assigned to for that maintenance section. Our Mountain Courtesy Patrol goes from Vail to the metro area along I-70 and C-470. Includes the Vail Pass, includes the approaches to the Eisenhower and Johnson Memorial Tunnels. Each group, if you will, operates slightly different, and that's based on different levels of partnerships with our partner agencies and different terrain issues and geography and traffic volumes. If you go to the next slide, please. So the Metro Area Safety Patrol, the service trucks are Ford F-250s. They're 4x4 with extended cabs and full-size beds. They're equipped with what I refer to as a solid steel wrecker type push bumper along the front. They also have 2 tow straps and 2 6-foot J-hooks with multiple hook clusters on them. Recently, the metro area started implementing debris trucks, which are the same service trucks, but they have a device on them that comes down from underneath of the bumper to help remove debris from the highway. The wreckers that are being used in the Metro Area Safety Patrol are generally Chevy 3500 single cabs with a combo wheel lift and swing boom and push bumpers to aid in quick clearance. Next slide, please. So the Mountain Area Courtesy Patrol, we have 3 different types of trucks. We have the heavy wreckers. In the mountains, that's what it started out with, was originally just a heavy tow program to get trucks who were stuck on the approach to the tunnel or fail pass out of traffic. Then we brought in Courtesy Patrol, which includes rollbacks, service trucks. The service trucks used are F-150 crew cabs with 4x4 push bumpers and tow straps and chains in them as well. The biggest challenges for us is vehicles that are stalling out on the fail pass and the approaches to the tunnel. We also have in the Mountain Courtesy Patrol area peak period shoulder lane, and when that is open, we have a rapid response team leader as well as a service truck and flatbed dedicated to that, since we take away the shoulder and turn it into a travel lane. So you could go to the next slide, please. So, pushing method. The service trucks in the metro area, that's their preferred method for moving disabled and wrecked vehicles. There's a lot of reasons for this. Mostly you're in the metro area. The wreckers from the Metro Area Safety Patrol and law enforcement's own rotational wreckers are usually not far away. It's quicker and safer to just push the vehicle onto the shoulder. The wreckers can push, but the owner of that company encourages their drivers to tow instead of push whenever possible. It's just easier for the tow trucks to pull them off than to push them. So in this, it's just basically like the video. You just walk up to the person, talk to them, and just tell them to drive off. You know, instruct them where you're going to push them to and everything like that. If we could go to the next slide. So the pooling method. The metro area service trucks can pull them. They are allowed to pull them. One of the issues that I personally ran into is one of the partner local law enforcement agencies that we have in the metro area tends to frown on courtesy patrol pulling and towing vehicles sometimes, especially if they're rolling. I was threatened with a ticket personally once because of this. So there's some liability and local towing regulations that come out of it. Can be done. It is done on a somewhat normal basis sometimes. The Mountain Courtesy service trucks, they pull more often than they push. A lot of this is because we're going to, the approach to the Eisenhower Tunnel is on the westbound or the eastbound side is a prime example. You could have 3 to 4 miles of nowhere safe to pull the vehicle to or push the vehicle to, and it's a winding interstate going up to the top of the hill up at the tunnel. So they would rather pull them in most cases. Simple thing, just use tow straps, chains. Most often, the courtesy drivers use chains on the Mountain Courtesy Patrol. If we could go to the next slide. The dragging anything goes. The picture here happened on I-25 in the metro area. Vehicle got rolled over up on the barrier there. Local law enforcement, if I remember correctly, was Greenwood Village, told the operator of the pickup truck to pull the vehicle and roll it onto its four wheels so that either our tow or the police tow could get it off the highway quicker. It's not dragging, flipping cars is not commonly utilized, but it's something that we can do. If we do drag it, we're going to drag it to the they would drag it to the closest wide enough shoulder for the vehicle where a tow can get it. I've heard some vehicles being dragged further than that, depending on the circumstances and what local law enforcement on scene want. It's most common for us to push the vehicle or to move the vehicle with a tow strap. Some of the more aggressive techniques is our state snowplows and Douglas County road and bridge crews have started to train to use their snowplows to move vehicles out of traffic as well. Again, it all goes back to that authority and removal law for us that are abandoned vehicles on public property. As long as we can justify the need to move the vehicle, and we did so in a reasonable manner, we're protected from additional damages so long as we didn't go out of our way to damage the vehicle. If we could go to the next slide. So the Twitter tweet here in the picture you see all stemmed from the same incident. This is one of concerns that some of the contractors have in Colorado is people got very upset when a local news agency took footage of one of the courtesy trucks on I-25 pushing a vehicle from the side off of the highway. They were doing so at the direction of State Patrol. That's what the trooper on scene wanted them to have done. A lot of people got upset, said if someone did that to their car, they would sue. As you can see, Douglas County Sheriff's responded saying that what we were doing was great, it was the right thing, we opened up traffic quickly. Dragging, pushing from the side, pushing while it's on its roof, pushing while it's on its side, all that stuff does open up potential liability issues. State law, again, provides indemnity for quick clearance. To my knowledge, there's never been a successful lawsuit against CDOT or our contractors while we've been operating under the statutes. Part of the liability comes from because the statute doesn't specifically say the contractors are covered. It says specifically either law enforcement personnel or agency employees, which Colorado has for a long time taken to mean CDOT employees. But as I said, to my knowledge, it's never been a successful lawsuit against either of the contractors who run the safety patrols. If we could go to the next slide. So anything goes includes driving the cars off the highway. As I said earlier, I've made cars drive several miles. In one case, I think 5 or 6 is the most I've made them do it, to limp off the highway. I know one of the courtesy tow truck drivers in the metro area got into a car that had the rear end of it ripped off, and since it was a front-wheel drive, was able to drive it while it's dragging itself off onto the shoulder. A lot of people do not realize how much a damaged vehicle can still operate. So it's one of the things that a lot of the courtesy drivers try to do is, can the vehicle still drive itself, regardless of how challenging it may be to get it to at least the shoulder where it's safer to hook up to, and we're opening a lane in the process. One of the metro area rapid response team leaders developed the quick clearance course for the maintenance guys, and what they do is at the maintenance training area, they take a front-end loader or other piece of heavy equipment, they take a Connex box and they simulate the size of a CMV, and they roll it around and push it around the yard to show that if a CMV were to roll over, no heavy tow were close by, but maintenance had heavy equipment in the area, we could use our heavy equipment to move it out of traffic. If we could go to the next slide. We could back up a slide. So my personal thoughts, the training works well. I didn't cover that earlier. I'm sorry about that. Incident Clear, which operates the service trucks and has a hand in the mountain contract as well, has several TIM certified instructors. They do in-house TIM training. They make use of the Colorado Department of Transportation and Douglas County TIM track down in Douglas County to push drag vehicles. It's a mock section of interstate with a Jersey barrier, as well as a mock section of state highway. Forget the length of it. It's pretty straightforward. It's just a piece of concrete area that they go down, flip cars, push cars, drag cars on. They can also do it at their yard. The service drivers for the metro area go through 40 hours of training with an experienced driver who is on the incident cleared side, and the service trucks is usually a TIM instructor as well. And then the tow drivers do a similar thing, but they get their TIM training either from the online course or through one of the instructors within Incident Clear. And then for the mountain courtesy, they ride along with a local driver or an experienced driver up on the mountain, and then they get usually the online TIMS course. That's really it for training. I believe, in my opinion, that the mix of service trucks and tow trucks is the right setup. There's been several times where we've been able to free up law enforcement to go handle more higher priority calls. Because a lot of times cops, until they realize what we do, think that they need to be there to fill out some sort of paperwork or not. In Colorado's case, law enforcement really doesn't need to do anything once they've approved us to move a vehicle, or if we've already gotten on scene first and decided we're going to move the vehicle. The only limitations we face with moving a vehicle is if there's been an accident and we believe there's the possibility for serious bodily injury, a fatality, or drugs or alcohol are involved. Some of the areas are safety patrol can move the vehicles right away. Some of the areas, such as the mountain quarter, we have to get approval to do it from law enforcement first. And that's pretty much it. Any questions? Or we go to the next slide.
Hey, Keith, somebody put in there, so all the training is on the job?
For the most part, it's all paid, unless you have already gotten the TIMS course from somewhere else. It can all be done on the clock by for incident clear by their own people inside, and it's all in-house. I think some of the tow companies, such as Western, who handles the mountain contract operations side of things, they encourage their drivers to go out and get Wreckmaster certified, and they'll pay for that. I'm not sure if Extreme offers that as well, but I know CDOT encourages and requires all of the safety patrol drivers to become TIM certified. And as I said, Incident Clear, who has a hand on both sides of the contracts for the metro area and mountain area, have internal TIM trainers that can conduct that training.
And for for folks on the line who might not be familiar with it, Incident Clear is a towing company. If I'm correct, Keith, they're a towing company that does national contracts for safety service patrols. I think there's a few other national companies that do similar things.
Correct. They're, I believe, the biggest competitor to Incident Clear that most people might recognize the name of is Autobase. They're similar to that. Primarily safety service patrol related stuff is all they do. They're not like some of these. They're not a local company. They operate in multiple states. If anyone wanted to get more information on them or any of the companies that we use, I can put you in contact with our statewide TIM coordinator, because he'd best be able to talk to you about how the contracts are managed, because they're managed out of a different office than I'm in.
You mentioned the Metro Area Rapid Response Team leader has developed a quick clearance course for the maintenance folks, and he described kind of what that involved. Is there anything in writing or any video or anything like that you could share, or coursework that you can share?
I haven't taken it yet or seen it, so I'm not sure what he does, but if you are interested in that and send me an email, I'll pass it on to him and let him know so he can discuss with you that, because like I said, I haven't taken that course itself yet.
Sure, okay. I'll open up, I don't see any hands raised. I'll open up the audio for a few seconds, and I see some people typing. We'll see if any other questions pop up. We'll just give it a second here. There was, I see there's a question from New York. Did you get any pushback from the local towers that would handle the expressway?
Yes. That's always an issue, I think, wherever you have safety service patrols operating tow trucks. And that's just from talking to different owners of different companies. We are in the mountain area working on a pamphlet that we can hand out to drivers that we've moved off the highway, because oftentimes people they're going from Denver to Vail. They don't know the small towns. They don't know who to call if they break down or whatever their question may be. So we're trying to give them a pamphlet, and part of that pamphlet will be to encourage them to Google the closest tow companies to try to direct them to the local companies, because we're a state entity and or state contractors, depending on who they're dealing with. We can't tell them who to call, other than if they can't find a tow on their own, that State Patrol can arrange a rotational tow for them at a fee to come out and get them. We try to work with the local tow companies. Some of them, I think no matter how much we explain it, all we're doing is moving the vehicle to safety. We don't care where they tell whoever they pick the car up from. It's not going to change their opinion. They're still going to see safety service patrols, even just the pickups doing roadside assistance, as taking money out of their pockets. They're not seeing the benefit to their drivers of safety and to the public safety in general.
All right, yeah, agreed. All right. Well, thanks a ton, Keith. Really appreciate it. Some good info. I think we'll go in the interest of time. We'll go to our next presenter. If there's something that didn't get addressed, or if you got something else that pops in your head for folks listening in, we'll see if we can circle back to it at the end here. So, Scott Yinger, hopefully you are ready and on deck. Scott's a retired trooper, Maryland State Police, after 28 years of service, up to the rank of major, and served as Assistant Chief of the Field Operations Bureau. He is currently overseeing the Emergency Response Deputy Director of Operations, overseeing the statewide and regional operations centers as well. Go ahead, Scott.
So thank you, John. I appreciate that introduction, and take an opportunity to thank the National Operations Center of Excellence and State Highways for this opportunity and providing this platform on a national level to share best practices on behalf of traffic incident management. So much appreciate that. You can go ahead and click again. So the first thing is, and we already heard about the authority to do this, I think DOTs have an inherent permission as the owner of the highways under emergency or exigent circumstances to keep the travel lanes clear. I think that's there. So in Maryland, all of our drivers are state employees. We do have a small percentage that are contractual, so they do fall under the contractor who may be liable for some things, but we haven't run into that issue here, and those drivers contractually have adopted the clear the road type push, pull, drag practices that our state drivers, I'll say, enjoy in order to keep the lanes open. We do have a move it law here in Maryland. We do not have a hold harmless law, but we have this clear the road policy, and you can click the next, click again. So this clear the road policy we have is in conjunction with the Maryland State Police. And part of the caveat here is to reopen the roadway as soon as possible on an urgent basis. So this gives us kind of statewide authority, if you will, in conjunction and understanding with law enforcement that this is our duty, our charge. It doesn't necessarily limit us in liability. Anyone is free to file a tort claim act through the state of Maryland if they think they were unjustly damaged by a state employee or the state government. They don't seem to need any hints on how to do that. They seem to find that pretty well, but I'll be quite honest with you. In my 8 years at CHART program, I've received probably, and it's not a lot, maybe it's a handful of tort claims a year, but out of those handful each year, I'll say 9 out of 10 or 90% of them are about damage we did when we changed a tire, not when we pushed, pulled, or drug anything out of the road. So we do have this clear the road policy. It paves the way. We have, maybe the word aggressive is not the best, but we do take an aggressive stance with push, pulling, and dragging. But each of the jurisdictions on the call need to understand and know, what their policies and laws and regulations may be and what they're able to do and to what level they can intervene to clear incidents to block travel lanes on the roads. Certainly that, I do think that is a DOT's charge. You can go to the next slide. Or actually, I guess we'll go to the video. So here's a video of a push, and you can see this is a very well-wrecked car. It's a very short video and not the greatest quality, but this is pushing a vehicle out of the travel lanes and down the shoulder to a safe place. And this is what we do. Our trucks have push bumpers. We have several different trucks. They're all relatively heavy trucks. This is what I do, push things out of the road. And there is another video of a push as well. And you can see this is a wrecked car. And I think it's clear, we need to make clear too, big difference between push, pulling, and dragging a vehicle that's simply disabled in the travel lanes or one that is wrecked. So one that is wrecked that we push, pull, drag, we don't get any issue with whatsoever. It's the all-wheel drive cars, the newer type cars, that if we go to pull them and we tear the transmission out, that's where you may get the tort claim. So what do we have to be able to do that? We'll see if this next video plays. And if it doesn't, that's okay. It was a rather interesting video. If it comes up, fine. If it doesn't, but it's kind of shocking to the eye at first where one of our trucks is pushing with a push bumper, broadside a relatively new model Corvette. So when people first look at this, they go, oh my goodness, look what it's doing to that Corvette. But this vehicle has actually been flipped. It rolled and ended up in the travel lanes. But this is what we do. Well, we clear the travel lanes as efficiently, safely as possible in order to get traffic moving. And this is one of those by whatever means. I do like that by any means, the BAM method there. But the driver here wants to make sure he gets every quarter panel on that side of the car damaged. So he does push it up against the guardrail, and we have the lanes clear, and then we can open things up. So we do have the authority to do that, the permissions to do that, and we take an aggressive stance. You can go to the next slide. So the next thing is having the capability to do that. So the first vehicle, we really have three types of vehicles in Maryland. This is a custom response vehicle. It's 9% of our fleet. It holds a great deal of supplies and equipment, specialty equipment. Doesn't have any means to tow other than by chain. Certainly can push, but doesn't have any lifting capacity, but does carry a great deal of temporary traffic control devices, cones, flares, metal saws, chainsaws, a lot of special equipment we use to keep travel lanes clear. You can click again. And the largest part of our fleet are tow trucks. So one interesting point that came up was towing and the relationship that Safety Service Patrol and this method has with your tow companies. One thing we made clear in Maryland, we continue to make clear with our towers, and we do have a good relationship now with the towing recovery professionals of Maryland, is that we do not tow. We relocate. And even though that may sound like a very small change in how you refer to what you do, that can make a huge difference that you're not in competition with the tow companies. You are simply relocating them to the nearest safe location, albeit a shoulder, a park and ride, wherever that may be. But we're in the relocation business. So these are tow trucks. That's the largest percent of our fleet. 46% of our fleet are tow trucks. And really what the drivers like about the tow truck, even though they have dual winches and cables, is the wheel lift. They use the wheel lift predominantly to move things out of the road, even if they are wrecked. They can lift a lot of front-wheel drive vehicles, rear-wheel drive vehicles, and move them safely move them, relocate them to the shoulder. But the problem with the tow truck is we can't carry many supplies. We're limited to about 20 cones. We can't carry the metal saws. They do have chainsaws. They have brooms and shovels and all the stuff you would normally have, but limited in the amount of supplies they can carry. So go to the next slide, or click again. Thank you. So we have utility trucks, and this is our newest utility truck. That's about 25% of our fleet. But we decided to adapt our utility truck, maybe a good cross between what the drivers utilize often is the wheel lift and increasing capacity of what we can carry when it comes to cones and absorbent and the equipment, the metal saws, the blowers, and everything else it takes to remove debris and other things that disrupt the surface transportation system. And we adapted a wheel lift to the back that's remotely controlled. Now this may be the vehicle that's the best of both worlds. All of our trucks are either F450s or 550s. They're all four-wheel drive. They're all dual-wheeled in the back that give us extra traction. Now this wheel lift is not as robust as what's on the back of a tow truck, but we did lift an F350, the front of an F350 with it, and it would be safe enough to relocate a short distance, but we wouldn't go any heavier than a lightly loaded or unloaded F350, but anything lighter than that. But this vehicle we're getting some experience with it now, and we're getting some rave reviews. Another good help with this is a camera system in the back that as the driver backs up, they almost do like a repo. They can back up, they can run this wheel lift as they back up and quickly pick a vehicle up and get it out of the roadway without having a second operator there. So we really do like that, and it's a good balance of relocation capability and carrying equipment and supplies. And it does allow us too. We can put a pin in this wheel lift and then put a hitch on it, and has a reese hitch on it that we can also tow with that wheel lift as the rear bumper and use it to relocate. So we're very pleased with this, and we hope we'll be able to report back some better use for this vehicle. You can go to the next slide. So push, pull, drag everything. Here's an incident that occurred on Interstate 95 northbound on the east side of DC, 2:40 in the morning on a weekday, which is a busy road at any time. But again, we need to get ready for rush hour in the morning. So our chart patrols in that area are 24/7. So we had drivers arrive on the scene soon after this tractor trailer, which was fully loaded with paper products, overturns on the interstate. As of Interstate 95, all lanes are blocked here, and you can see that only the left shoulder is getting by. So two of these drivers used both of their trucks, and you can go to the next slide. And they hooked to this vehicle and slid the front end of it over to lane 3 in order to open lane 1 and 2. So they did this shortly after they got there. So they had lanes 1 and 2 by 3:45 because fire rescue had to clear, hazmat had to clear, law enforcement had to give thumbs up. But when they did, they hooked their chart trucks to it, put it in four-wheel drive low, and with chains, they pulled the cab and the front of the trailer off of lane 1 and 2 and was able to get some traffic by. Heavy-duty wreckers got there. They lifted that vehicle and had the scene clear, all lanes clear by 5:11 in the morning, which helped for morning rush. So there's some advantages to employing this type. You can go ahead again to click again. And this is what the driver wrote in his email about it, about what he was able to accomplish. There we go. Is that they were able to drag the vehicle using the chart vehicles and drag it over into lane 3 and the right shoulder in order to get lanes 1 and 2 by. You can go ahead and click again. So we're very clear in our standard operating procedures that our actions are governed very closely with our drivers here. This tells them exactly what they should do no matter the vehicle in the road or anything in the road. But they protect the scene first. They contact our centers, make sure they know what they're doing, give the exact location, and if they need backup, simply ask for request other assistance should they need it. This is the key, though. Provide a description, license plate number, and what lanes are blocked. That's going to be key into your ATMS system that you can go back in the history, that you document what you are moving, why you are moving it. It's always good, too. We don't require this, but we encourage it. Take a photo before you move it, and then take a photo after you relocate it. It helps document was there any damage, because people that own vehicles seem to have a foggy memory as to whether that damage was there before or after we moved their vehicle. And again, most vehicles that we push or pull or drag out of the road are totaled anyway, so it really doesn't matter in the long run. Go ahead to the next slide. Excuse me. Go to the next slide. Some of the benefits. This is an interesting part of this that keeps our program sustained. We developed an early relationship with the University of Maryland early on in the CHART program, and they take our data from our advanced traffic management system and analyze it every year as to the effectiveness of the CHART program. And those reports are open to the public. If you go on the CHART website, and there is a hyperlink there for you. You go to our reading room. If you have insomnia, these engineers' reports will help cure that. But there is an executive brief in the front end that's about 10 pages long that tells you pretty much all I need to know. But the methodology is very technical. The algorithms they use and formulas they use are very lengthy in order to determine how effective we are in analyzing this data that we provide. But there's reports there from 2006 to present, every year, every calendar year, that you can review and are available to the public. So we make sure that's open to everybody. So in 2018, their analysis showed that incidents involving where CHART was present were actually cleared on average 8 minutes quicker than if CHART was not present. So that helps to show that there is an advantage to having a traffic incident management program and some specialized groups. We find that difference is shrinking a little bit as the training gets out there and others begin to employ these methods, law enforcement, fire rescue, and the like, that even if CHART's not there, we're clearing things quicker, but still an 8-minute reduction on average is pretty extensive. And the safety factor of having an aggressive push-pull-drag method and reducing the lane closure time, CHART it was estimated by the University of Maryland that we prevented 431 secondary crashes and 849 lane-changing crashes because we were able to clear the roads. Significant increase in safety on our roads. They determined that due to the delay time that we saved, fuel consumption that we reduced on the travel network, as well as reducing emissions, that the cost savings to Maryland taxpayers in 2018 by the CHART program was over $1.3 billion. Pretty significant when you're talking to policymakers and legislators about, is it important to have some regulation or some authority to move things from the roadway, especially realizing the cost, the increase in safety and the cost-benefit ratio. So if you look at the CHART program and about how much we spend on the CHART program and the benefit savings in 2018, for every dollar spent on the CHART program in 2018, the University of Maryland independently deemed that we returned on that $1 investment $37 to the Maryland taxpayer. So again, helps justify your legislation if you're looking for it, if you can look at those benefits. It certainly helps our program sustain itself as well. So maybe an added benefit to these type of methods. You can go to the next slide. And with that, I'll take any questions anyone may have.
Hey, thanks, Scott. So a question regarding the wheel lifts. Is that an in-house design or is that an off-the-shelf addition?
That is an off-the-shelf. We found this, one of our drivers found this at a company actually in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, in a neighboring state. And we looked at this and we decided to pilot it on 3 of our recent utilities we had built. They do offer a winch option. A little bit of a drawback there. You can't have an aft axle fuel tank, so you can't have a 40-gallon capacity fuel tank when you have a wheel lift underneath the rear. So we had to go with a midship tank, which is only 23 gallons. It limits the range of the truck a little bit, but nevertheless, it is a off-the-shelf item.
If you're able to, if you have it handy, if you want to just type in the name of that into the discussion pod, or maybe something we can send out later on. I'm kind of curious. Was there any drama with the towers, or you kind of passed that by calling it relocate and kind of passed the drama with them?
The wheel lift is not a new thing. We've had tow trucks for many, many years. I'll say at least, well, before my existence there, so probably at least 20 years. CHART has employed tow trucks. And early on, there was a great deal of resistance. But over the years, they've begun to understand that we're actually there to help them. Yeah, sometimes some independent towers will give us a fit because they lose their recovery fee, because we'll flip a vehicle on its wheels, put it on the shoulder, pointed the opposite direction so they can easily lift the vehicle and move it and tow it. So it becomes a tow bill rather than a recovery bill. We get a little bit of that. But all in all, the Towing Recovery Professionals of Maryland Association, we have a great relationship with them now because they truly do understand we provide a different service and one that's beneficial to them as well by keeping the travel lanes clear.
All right. I see there's some good discussion in the pod. I don't see any direct questions. I don't see any hands up. So certainly if folks have questions, type them in to the pod and we'll circle back. But thanks again, Scott. Very interesting.
Thank you.
All right, next up, John Sullivan, Hero Response Supervisor 1 with Tennessee Department of Transportation Help Unit, serving Nashville and Middle Tennessee since 1999. Mr. Sullivan is also a lieutenant firefighter with the PGROM, hopefully saying that right, Fire Department, and a TIMS EVOC and Vehicle Extrication Instructor. Recently received a Meritorious Life-Saving Award from TDOT in October 2019 for rescue of a man from a burning structure while on patrol with TDOT's Help Unit in 2018. Good job. Thanks, John. You are good to go.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? So here, I'm going to speak, this is for Region 3 here in Middle Tennessee. We have 4 regions. I'm mainly speaking on Region 3, but it's basically a statewide with all the methods that are used by TDOT Help. Obviously, we use all the methods, and all the methods have an application at one point or other. Go ahead to the next slide. So prioritizing the methods, of course, always be the safest. Safety of all should be considered every time. Safety should always trump the quick clearance. That's my personal thought on that, but I'm sure it applies to everyone nationwide. If it can't be done safely, don't do it. Obviously, being the most practical applications apply with consideration given to the end goal. Considering the need and then consider it done. And always trying to do it with due regard. As long as it's done in a reasonable manner that anyone with the same task, training, and equipment would do under the same circumstances. We feel it would be the best practice for that. You can go ahead and next slide, please. So in Tennessee, they added to the Tennessee Code annotated code. We do have some indemnification from removal of vehicles, and obviously, as it states, the Department of Safety, Transportation, and local law enforcement agencies can call for these vehicles to be removed. And like Keith was saying, and I think Scott was echoing the same sentiment, that we've not had many tort liability cases. And I'm sure, like Scott was saying earlier, that most of the liability comes out of tire change damages and things like that versus the removal of damaged vehicles. And the next slide, it'll show about the tort liabilities. Obviously, there's stated in the TCA codes that there is a liability from the state and the local law enforcement agencies. So they do have a reasonable amount of back in there where they could, apply some kind of liability to either of the departments. We can go to the next slide. So with our training practices, we obviously, with all of our employees, do have a specific push bumper training that we do in-house, and it's mostly all on-the-job training. And a lot of it's task-specific training on relocating vehicles. We've definitely picked up the pace on relocating vehicles, not just with the push, pull, or drag methods, but I'm sure nationwide everyone agrees there's other means of relocating vehicles that we would consider relocating vehicles. If it's maybe just a flat tire, having them just drive the vehicle without pulling, pushing, or anything, just having the motorist drive the vehicle a short distance to make it a safer location to make the repair. Or if they're having to wait on a tow truck, we would, even if it's a flat tire or it's maybe a mechanical problem where we can get them to a short distance, maybe it's an overheat and it's cooled down sufficiently, things like that, we might have them drive the vehicle themselves to a safer location, obviously providing traffic control for them, just to free up the space and make it safer for the towers when they do come to pick them up. If they're in a location such as a bridge or a guardrail too close, or it's going to be a narrow spot for a record or a tow truck to come in and pick them up, we're definitely going to try to relocate them using any of the, I call it the 5 methods, really, because some of the time they can drive a short distance. So all of our drivers receive this on-the-job training, and they ride along with an operator. Obviously, it's about 120 to 150 hours, sometimes a little longer, and they're all trained on the recognition of the need for it and the practice of it. And like I said, any of the vehicles we relocate include everything under the sun. Even motorcycles, sometimes we forget about those. They're a little bit different to relocate. Obviously, you're not going to push or pull one. We have to have them, get it in neutral. It's a whole different operation when you deal with motorcycles sometimes, but it's becoming a lot more common. So I'm sure that's a different beast altogether when it comes to relocating motorcycles. So we can go to the next slide, please. So with the training practices, obviously we don't have any prior experience requirements for operators to be hired in. Obviously we do look for that kind of experience, and we're taking into consideration. But all the operators are trained in relocating disabled or damaged vehicles, and some of our operators are a little more skilled I had some towing background myself, was light, medium, and heavy-duty towing recovery experience myself. And I think we may have a couple others that have been to Wreckmaster training. No current level limits the type of method that's utilized. Some are more experienced and skilled at it, and obviously we will dispatch a supervisor or a more skilled operator with them if they had any issues with relocating or needing more skill. And we always try to train to avoid the damage to vehicles whenever possible, work with guys on how to hook up, the best places to hook up on vehicles to minimize the damage. And we train all of them to communicate that damage and claim assistance to the motorists and supervisors, which falls into some of the reluctance to the motorists, which will be on the next screen. I think we'll talk into the next screen about the reluctant motorists. So I guess what we found definitely here in Middle Tennessee is dealing with these reluctant motorists. It happens on a case-by-case basis. I think over the years we've seen the motorists in this area definitely be less reluctant. They're seeing it on a more regular basis. Obviously, training our operators to be calm, assertive, and confident. That confidence definitely relates to the motorist. If they feel you're confident in what you're doing and you're making them feel safe and using due regard, I think they're going to cooperate with you a lot more. Obviously, always fully communicating with the motorists on a solid approach that they agree with as well. Sometimes they don't understand, and as we all know, coming to relocate vehicles, the driver's demeanor is a huge consideration when you deciding to push, pull, or drag vehicles. We try not to even use the word drag anymore, because when you say you're going to drag a car, that we have to watch our vocabulary a little bit. Sometimes that makes them a little more reluctant when you say I'm going to drag your car to the shoulder versus I'm going to relocate your car. I always try to mutually agree upon the approach with law enforcement or anybody else that's on scene. I know the Tennessee Highway Patrol has taken a way more aggressive stance over the last few years and clearing lanes, and we get a way less pushback from the local agencies anymore at this time. Always remembering every situation is different, and the approach has to be matched to the situation, and we try not to force the approach. I know that can be a reluctance issue as well. So we can go to the next slide. And again, following up with dealing with the reluctant motorist, the frequency of damage is pretty minimal when having to pull a vehicle, even with full resistance. I think we're running into more cars, and you're probably finding this nationwide as well, that a lot of the newer cars are they're just not set up the way they used to be. You got a lot more all-wheel drive vehicles, a lot more of the vehicles with the where you're not able to functionally put them in neutral like we used to do. Studying on some of the new car manufacturers, they all have different approaches on how to place vehicles in neutral now. It's not just as easy as turning the key anymore and shifting it in the neutral with the brake applied. It's some of the push button starts are getting to be a problem, I think, nationwide. Some of them you may not even know the vehicle's still running. So we're having to look at some training issues on that. And then the risk versus reward philosophy, I think, plays a part also in working with the motorists, explaining to them, the risk of their safety and our safety as well, and then the need to go ahead and get them relocated to a safer location. So we can go to the next slide, please. I hope I'm not speeding through this, and anybody can slow me down at any time. The equipment used, obviously the same kind of equipment like Keith was speaking of earlier, chains and tow hooks and straps. We do have winches on the front of our trucks that we use every now and then. We all have the tow hitch with receivers. Run into a lot of times where we can relocate trailers or they'll become dislodged and things like that. Sometimes it's a lot quicker to hook it up to one of our vehicles than it would be to the damaged vehicle. We'll go ahead to the next slide. I think it's got a picture of one of the trucks. basically the same setup as you'd see across the nation. This is one of our operator trucks with the push bumper, and you can see the winch mounted in the front. And so these trucks can push quite a bit of weight. We regularly push semis that are fully loaded, as long as we can get air pressure in them. And one of these trucks can usually push anything up to an 80,000-pound semi, short distances, even uphill, just to get them to the shoulder. We can pull them or push them. I know a lot of times it's a lot easier to push these semis versus pulling them. Obviously, we'd have a issue with traffic control. We'd have another truck dispatched with them to provide traffic control, and one may be pulling. Sometimes it's just a lot easier, depending on the situation, to be able to push a semi, just a stalled semi. And we have used these on occasion. I did not get to upload a video. I've got a couple of videos I could share of trucks pushing, like the ones that Scott was showing, the semi on its side, the trailer, and just pushing one to the shoulder of the road. And we've also worked with all of our rural response, with our maintenance crews, are all receiving training as well, statewide, through all the maintenance sections, where they're able to clear lanes and things like that in our more rural areas where we're not providing the safety service patrol capabilities. So if we go to this next slide, there's some times where there's special considerations, even relocating just to, this is a picture of one where a vehicle was in a crash and the driver came to rest against a median wall, and for the fire EMS to have access to the patient to get this patient out of this vehicle, they just need to move it just a short distance at first. Obviously, we're going to relocate it to the shoulder when they're done. But under their care and direction, they're requesting us more often now just to pull one away from a wall, or just to get the access to the patient more often. Something that's kind of not done before. They would take them a lot longer response-wise to have access to a patient. And I think they're really, over the last few years, they've definitely noticed our capabilities and taking advantage of those, and requesting us on scene to move vehicles like this one. I think in the next slide I have another picture that kind of states the same thing. And I'm sure some of your other agencies and partners across the U.S. are maybe being requested to do some of the same things. This is another situation. Had full access to the driver of this vehicle, but the passenger of the vehicle came to rest against a wall again. So in consideration of the access to the patient, they had our unit hooked to it, and under their direction and care, slowly manipulate the vehicle away from the wall, which gave them quicker access to the patient and cleared that scene a whole lot quicker. And of course, as soon as they cleared and all the response agencies are out of the way, we cleared everything further to the shoulder and opened up more lanes. Definitely results in a quicker clearance time, and it's just going through cooperation with the local fire and EMS. Like I said, they're way more aware of our capabilities now and actually taking advantage of them. So we can go to the next slide, please. I think we have a video on this next slide. Okay, this is just a picture of one. We do regularly get in the habit of recovering vehicles to the roadway. This is one recently had one of my newer employees working on honing his skills on recovering this SUV to the shoulder. Now, it is not blocking. Obviously, we do have the right lane blocked at this time out of a 3-lane highway, busy metro area. And we know once we get on scene, we see the recognition of the need to go ahead and recover this vehicle up to the shoulder, if at all possible, to speed this clearance up, because when the wrecker gets there, he's going to have to take up considerably more room and time to recover this vehicle. If it's something that we feel confident that we can slide it back and relocate it up to the shoulder, which is obviously what we did in this slide. We were able to hook to it and pull it backwards and then upright it and get it onto the shoulder. So it made it a whole lot quicker and easier for the tow and recovery vehicle. Once he got on scene, all he had to do was back up to it and load it and get going. So this scene I think from the time I got there, this may be 45 minutes to an hour, if that, from the time we arrived to the time that it was fully cleared and lanes were all open and running. So we can go to the next slide. I think there's a couple of videos on the next two slides. Okay, so this video again is what most of your partners are familiar with. This vehicle on the side. This was on its roof. I showed this video up. He actually brought it from its roof onto its side and then onto its wheels. Again, you know, just doing those few moves, it's not taking any money out of the record operator's pocket or the towing businesses at all. Like I said, it's getting the lanes clear, and it's giving them the benefit of being able to load in a safer location and not having to go through the extra steps. And it's clearing the overall, it's definitely reducing the overall clearance time if it can be done in a safe manner. The next slide is going to show, this is actually a towing operator that arrived on scene right as we were hooking up to this vehicle. And he's actually helping us out. I mean, we've got a pretty good relationship going there. And he's actually guiding the gentleman that has to pick up. And he's well aware of the operation that's going on. He knows it's going to be quicker. He's with the input. So just see that the vehicle upright. We're going to pull to the show and provide traffic control for him while he loads it up. Like I said, the name of the game, I think, in a lot of cases, is making us less of a target for not on the shoulder any longer than it would have to be. Since we can do for he would have to do the same, basically the same function here as we do. So we can go to the next slide. Now, I've got a few stats here. I didn't pull up a whole lot of stats. Obviously, they're the statewide. We relocated vehicles just from January 1st to the present day, obviously almost 10,000 times statewide. And here in Nashville, I know in Region 3, speaking on our behalf, we've definitely upped our game to relocating as many vehicles as possible when it's favorable. And like I said, some of these may not be relocated by just push, pull, or drag. It may be having them drive to the next exit or a short distance to a safer location. And I think the next slide just shows a total number of responses or the lane blocking incidents, which are up pretty high. So I have that, I guess here in our area, showing about 68 a day of lane blocking incidents average. I could have pulled up some more statistics, but just trying to give a kind of a clear view of what we were doing, the number of relocating vehicles to the number of lane blocking incidents. I think I think this is about the end of it. And that's it. I was trying to be kind of quick and efficient with it. I hope I didn't rush through it too bad. Has anybody got any questions?
There was one in there, John, about do you have a way to get air into semi-tractor trailers if their air brakes are locked up? Do you have a way to give them air?
Yes. So we can provide them air. We've trained all of our operators on this, and we've also given them all the capabilities to provide air to their tanks. It's something we do on a pretty regular basis. We've had glad hand extensions made for the trailers to provide air to the trailers, and we've also come up with quick connections to put air into the system just to give them enough air pressure just to get them out of the roadway. Now, obviously dealing with CMB, we're going to go ahead and call for heavy towing recovery right away, and then we may do what we can in the meantime. All of our operators are becoming a lot more aware through the training of what their capabilities are pretty quickly and getting the ball rolling and getting towing and recovery. And like I said, we give every consideration to towing and recovery. We don't, we usually rely on the local police or THP to go ahead and get towing and recovery started. But we also have the capabilities to go ahead and call them and start giving them heads up on what we have. While the police are getting them en route, we may speak to them personally one-on-one with the companies, giving them a game plan or what we're looking at, what kind of capabilities we're going to need when they arrive.
All right. Well, thanks a bunch, John. Really appreciate it. Some very good.
Thank you so much.
Very good information. Yeah, thank you. All right. Our next one up here will be Eric Hemphill. Eric is North Texas Tollway Authority's Director of Traffic and Incident Management, NTTA. The Traffic and Incident Management Department is responsible for the safety of all employees and customers on the roadways. Mr. Hemphill also volunteers in his community, having served in various roles with the Texas Public Works Association, Corporate Challenge, benefiting Texas Special Olympics, the City of Murphy, Texas, and his local school PTA Board of Directors. He also serves as a panel member on a National Cooperative Highway Research Program, NCHRP project to develop traffic control devices and countermeasures to reduce wrong-way driving incidents. Thank you, Eric.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you. I'm going to move quick because I know we got a 2 o'clock shutdown, and having been to the HERO program in October for one of our field trips, I'm very interested to hear what Mr. Phillips says. So just really quickly, this slide is to tell you that, yes, I am as part of a state agency. We are Chapter 366, the Transportation Code, so we do have a lot of the legal things that have been discussed already. We're a little bit different, though, as we just have a project service area. So next slide, please. That project service area is basically around the DFW Metroplex. On the left is the city, in the center of that is the city of Fort Worth. In the middle of the other box is Dallas, where everything's kind of coming out of. You can see the ring roads. The blue roads are ours. We have about 1,100 lane miles, including a tunnel, a bridge, middle of nowhere traffic, and downtown Dallas traffic. So next slide. We are a 24/7, 365 operation. We have three offices we go out of. We currently have 50 vehicles in the fleet. We're about to here shortly increase that to 15. They've been on the shop. They're on the yard. They're getting hooked up now. We do provide free roadside assistance. A little bit about our trucks. You've kind of heard the push, pull, drag. We have the chains and all that good stuff. On the truck on the left, push bumper, chains, and all that stuff, so we can push, pull, drag just like any others. The one on the right is, we call it a safety recovery vehicle. Scott had mentioned earlier that the towing operators and things like that, they don't call theirs a tow truck either. The name of ours are safety recovery vehicles for that same reason. In working with the tow industry, we have a great relationship with them. They were nervous when they saw them roll into our yard, but when we call them, hey, we're there just to move cars, relocate them, and get them for you to make it easier for you. Now, we do have contract wrecker services that do require a 25-minute response time. And so when we get the vehicles off to the shoulder, and they can slip up and grab them a lot faster because traffic's moved, they actually saw the benefit. They're not tying their drivers up as long stuck in traffic, and they're able to meet their 25-minute goal, especially if we relocate them to a parking lot or anything like that. So for commercial vehicles, they get 60 minutes, but we do have a trip program much like Atlanta, but we're not talking about that today. The funny part about that, when Scott showed that lift underneath that 1-ton truck they have, that's how we got our program started. We couldn't convince anybody that towing them or moving them with the wheelless was a good thing. We had a tow truck, or we had a truck that was about to go out of service. We convinced them to keep it. We spent about 10 grand to put a wheel lift underneath it, or a lift underneath it. Went out in the first few weeks, towed and moved a whole bunch. Our executive director actually saw it moving a car out of the traffic so he could get by. After that, we realized that we got the program sold, so we were actually able to get real tow trucks that have a little bit bigger capacity, as Scott mentioned, to move larger things and get things out of the way. About a month later, that truck, our test truck, was hit by a drunk driver and totaled. So we actually got more from the insurance settlement than we would have gotten if we would have sold it for salvage. So I always tell people we made money doing a pilot project for towing and could show it on the books. We do have the move over or slow down law. The move it off the highway law. We have move over, slow down too, but we have it, if you can move it, you've got to. The good news about us is when we're dispatching state troopers directly from our traffic management center. If we have any pushback, typically the operator will turn up the radio real loud near the occupants of the vehicle and say, hey, they're refusing to leave, and the trooper will come on board and say, hey, this is Trooper so-and-so. Let them know that if I get there and I determine their vehicles are movable, they both get citations for not getting it out of the road. We have really good compliance after that, but prior to that, a lot of people just keep them there because they think the police need to see them. So we do also have a waiver, even though we're illegal, legally we're not responsible. We do have waivers that our legal team has come up with. So if we do happen to damage a vehicle, they've signed a waiver, and the legal aspect of we don't care anyway goes on. So next slide, please. So we kind of already talked about the push, pull, drag, and we do all that, and you're more than welcome to come out and actually join with us in one of our training days. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we also keep these on our trucks. Then we refer to them as Go-Jacks. That's the brand name for them. They are basically wheel lifts. A set of 4 of them can cost you about $1,000. We heard earlier from the other guys, the public does kind of hate when you're pushing, moving, or dragging or pulling their cars. So this is kind of our, quote, nice way to move them. In this picture, you see it's a training thing, so the car is in relatively good shape. Nothing's damaged. But if the tires or axles are broken and it won't push very well, or if the tire's really messed up, maybe not even broken, but messed up, instead of sitting there putting up with the public and us damaging their vehicles, we've been able to basically slide these under. And in this picture you see they've basically slid them under each tire. You jack them up a little bit. And next slide, please. And then it just becomes a roller skate. In this issue, you see a bunch of folks standing around because, again, this is a training aspect. But 2 people can easily push a car over to the shoulder, as if you see in the next slide. So that's it. 2 folks, those folks were from other agencies. We were training, just came over, pushed it right over to the side. Unlike you would think, it doesn't just have free flow and it's moving and you can't stop it. Once you get it moving, you can slow it down as well. So within a matter of minutes is all it takes. Once you know, it's basically sliding them under the car, getting them in, getting them over. You don't have to put up with, well, we don't care if we damage your car. The people don't mind as much. And one of the examples we use, although it could be used, and we do use it in crashes just to get the damaged vehicles over that may have locked up or their brakes might have an issue or something, instead of push, pulling, and dragging it, we will move it over to the side. So it helps free the traffic up. The regular tow trucks get out there and get it on their way. Again, this is minutes. One example we used just recently after we got these, the guy had run out of gas in the middle lane of a 3-lane roadway, left his vehicle to walk and get the gas. So the truck was out there. It was a Ford Explorer out there in the middle of the traffic. Our units pulled up. It was abandoned. Nobody around. They go-jacked it, moved it over the shoulder, and as they were as the tow truck to come move it was showing up, the guy showed back up, and there was a long argument about why he left his truck in the middle of the road. And he kept pointing to the fact that, no, I didn't. See, it's here on the shoulder. So it was kind of funny. The guy even didn't know he left it in the middle of the lane of traffic, but we were able to get it over and get it gone. So, but that's just a way I haven't seen talked about, so I kind of want to mention that we use these. They've been very inexpensive, very easy to use, very quick. And what we see is with the customers, we don't have to spend a lot of time arguing with them that, hey, we're going to do this, or the way we talk to them. By the time we're done arguing with them, a lot of times push-pull, we could have them go jacked off to the side. But there's not always room to go jack. So next slide. We have the safety recovery vehicles. So we push, pull, drag as well. And you can see the truck you're blocking. Again, these are all training pictures we had that I'll get to in just a second. We've been doing the safety recovery vehicles for a while. We've been able to expand them along the way, showing the benefit of getting them over, getting them on, getting them out of the road, getting the road open and moving, so the secondary crashes are reduced, the recovery of the roadways increased, et cetera. I did mention we are a toll road. A lot of people feel like they're paying for the toll road. They should be able to go the speed limit and do their thing. Not realistic, but we still try to live up to that. So the safety recovery vehicle, when there's not a shoulder or anything like that, or even when there is a shoulder, if they're hooked up, we'll drag everything to a parking lot. Oftentimes before the troopers ever arrive on scene, you'll hear our guys basically tell them, hey, we're in the McDonald's parking lot or the Walmart parking lot or the Target or whatever nearby parking lot now. They can come meet us there. And they're filling out the crash report in a parking lot away from the road. Everybody's safer. So it's not just about stalled vehicles. We'll move crashed vehicles as well. They also carry gas, tire changing, and chains like that, so they can do what the other trucks can do for the most part. Our largest volume is tires and gas, so they can get them on the road. But we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So the training these folks take is there are no CDL requirements. We've made our vehicles the way we are for no CDL. Every one of our drivers does a 6-month training program starting from scratch, from classroom to field. So our training platform here, you see where we're in that picture, that's a large expanse of concrete we use to actually do training right beside live traffic, but very well protected, so you hear even the live traffic going by. And then our wrecker operators will then attend RecMaster training as well. Our safety operators will attend RecMasters, but we also send the other guys to RecMasters because oftentimes we want them to be on the lookout to make sure our guys are doing it correctly, and then it allows them to also promote and advance. And every year we go through additional training and just continue to refresh that as well. So that's kind of what we do. Next slide, please. We hosted on November 6th of last month a training day. 9 outside agencies, as you can see in this picture, 10 of us, and you include us, we're on the far right, came to our training facility, our training site. You can even see traffic moving in the background to basically do push, pull, drag, train. We looked at tools, equipment, driver training, debris pickup, vehicle approach, turning your tires, not turning your tires, everything involved in that. Agencies brought trucks and field staff, so it was great. It wasn't just the management. We had all of the trucks you can see behind the folks. We used each one of their trucks and exchanged ideas. So as we trained them, we showed them how we push, pull, and drag, even around corners. We have a cone course set up, so as you're going around a curve, you know how to release and push and pull. And it led to a lot of good exchange of ideas. In fact, we were taking some parts off of our truck and trying to hook them up to other trucks just to see if they fit. But what it taught us is that a lot of people are doing it the same but different. So next slide, please. We had 2 cars donated by our wrecker operator for the use of the day, and as you can see, they were damaged, so they weren't too concerned about how they got them back, which allowed us to really do good training because we weren't too concerned about the vehicles. Excuse me. Each agency took their turns. In this picture, you see our Dallas County Courtesy Patrol, which is located here in Dallas, hooking up, showing us how they chain up to a car, where they would chain up to a car, and everybody standing around exchanging ideas. And on the right, you see how he drug it. As you can see, just the nature of the car, you can see the path of the skid marks. It was locked up. There was nothing we could do to release the brakes, so we were just dragging it all around. Next slide, please. After each agency took turns pulling, we showed off basically how we push people around, for lack of a better term. You can see in the top left is Dallas County's push bumper. The one on the top right is a private partnership around here, public-private partnership that runs one of the roads around here. And you can see they put tires on the edge of their push bumper to basically get a better grip and shove off the cars and protect their truck a little bit more. They're protected under the liability, so they're not too concerned about marking it up. And the bottom is the City of Fort Worth Abandoned Vehicle Enforcement. They sound like they're abandoned vehicle enforcement. That's their courtesy patrol on their highways. And so much so that we're looking at their new bumper that they got to put on our vehicles. So next slide, please. We talked about it already. This is just a couple pictures of by any means necessary. This vehicle started in traffic, and Dallas County, using their car, just pushed it quarter panel by quarter panel over a couple lanes until they got it to the shoulder. Next slide, please. And just to show it could be done with a smaller vehicle, the city of Fort Worth showed how they do it as well, by basically taking the same approach with the smaller vehicle, push-pull. The funny note about this one is that operator, as we were letting every agency do it, multiple people from every agency, that operator, nobody else from Fort Worth wanted to do it, so he went ahead and took 3 turns just because he was having so much fun being able to do it without having to worry about any paperwork afterwards. So that was kind of what we learned at the training day. So next slide, please. One thing I wanted to cover real quick is what we're really focused on is not just clearing the travel lanes. They're not the only hazard. Just this week alone, we've had 3 vehicles that were safely, and I put that in quotation marks if you're looking at me, on the shoulder that were struck by other vehicles. One involved a truck that flipped and rolled. Thankfully, they weren't killed, but they were seriously injured. But it was a vehicle that was, quote, safely on the shoulder. So we use our safety recovery vehicles, which they're not tow trucks, but not just for crashes and whatnot. In this case, the vehicle had some mechanical issues that we were not going to be able to repair on the side of the road. So we hauled them off to a parking lot and waited there for a regular tow truck to show up. We won't leave them abandoned on the road. If we can't help them, for example, they don't have a spare tire or their engine's just really screwed up and we can't get them, and we don't want to tear up their car getting them out of the road, we'll hook up and move. Just recently, our board of directors passed an immediate tow ordinance, so we do have the ability now, if an abandoned vehicle is found, we can immediately tow. We haven't rolled that out yet because it was just approved. We want to do some additional public outreach, say don't leave your vehicles, because we find about 10 cars a day abandoned on the side of our road because people have left them. Again, this doesn't require CDL. You can see in this picture he's doing a wheel lift because of the distance. Otherwise, sometimes we just hook up and go. But it's focused on getting in the lanes open. In one of the cases, too, we will move them off the shoulder if it's unsafe for our people to do the work on the car. It might be a simple tire change, which we can do in about 12 to 15 minutes from start to finish. But we can hook up a truck and we can hook up this car and get it out of the road and moving, and our guy not out of the vehicle in less than 4 minutes from the time he arrives, which reduces the amount of time we're out of the truck in an unsafe location. We'll drag them to the parking lot, change their tire, and then get on their way from there. So I knew I flew by really quick, but I'm telling you, Mr. Phillips has got good stuff to say. So with the next slide, please. This is just our good team that helped us put together all that training that we did for those outside agencies, and I leave you with a question. If you all have some training programs that you do on a regular basis, some outside training, push, pull, drag, or if you're inviting others from around your region to do training, please get in touch with me. We reached out to Georgia DOT and was able to go out to their Atlanta Hero program, got to watch a trip and got to ride with their guys. We've taken back some valuable information. So I have a question for you. If you have something like that, please reach out to us. We're willing to go to other places just to exchange ideas. So with that, I'll open it up to anybody else.
All right, thanks, Eric. Very good stuff. I like that idea of the training day. That's pretty neat. And yeah, ditto for us. Certainly, folks have training material that they can submit. That's good. Or if you have plans, I mean, anything. That's for I think a lot of what we're all trying to do here. And then I guess going on to the future with the whole industry association and all that is also part of the goal of that too. I will move on up ahead to Jeff Phillips. I'm not seeing any questions here in the pod. Some good discussions, not seeing any questions. So I will move ahead to Jeff Phillips. He is the assistant manager of the Hero unit, overseeing operations, training, and fleet. He has been with Hero for 4.5 years as an operator, FTO, and acting supervisor before being promoted to assistant manager. Mr. Phillips retired from Clayton County Fire Department as lieutenant after 31 years of service. Thank you, sir, and Jeff, you are up.
Good afternoon. Good to see you again, Eric, and talk to you. In Georgia, I'm going to be short and sweet since we only have 15 minutes. In Georgia, we have a steer and clear law, which means you get it out of the road. So Hero is very aggressive on clearing the road. First option is to drive it. Second option will be to push it. The third option will be to pull it. Fourth option will be to drag it. We also upright vehicles. Anything we can't see around, we don't push, but we will pull. So when I was a supervisor, we had problems with some operators having excess chain with a single J, where they were using a double J to pull a vehicle. So what we did was develop a chain just to test to see how it would do. So we cut a logging chain that had been damaged previously and cut it 40 inches long, put a big hook on one end and a regular hook on the other end, and used it in adjacent with the double J. We take the double J's, hook it on each lower control arm of the vehicle, put that chain that we made in between the D-ring and hook it to the ball. The purpose for this, when we drag a vehicle, is that we want that vehicle as close to our bumper as possible. If it was to break free, it causes minimal damage, if any, if it hits the back of our truck. Occasionally that happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but occasionally it does. It also provides a little bit more control of the vehicle. Some of the shoulders we have in Atlanta are quite tight, so we need as much control of the vehicle to get it completely onto the shoulder. In the slide there to the left, that was a chain that we just had manufactured for us. It's 38 inches long, has two normal size hooks on one end, and then it has a shorter version of a J hook on the other. The middle slide right there is, you see the one that we had made, and then you see the new one here below it. The third slide is hooked up to the Hero truck to the vehicle. So it's a double J down here where you see the push bumper of the SUV is, and then that chain is being used as the chain that we made. So if you can go to the next slide. Third slide here is the first slide is the one using the new hook that we just had made. I think it's going to be pretty good using this hook. You can use it either way. You can use the J hook around the ball of the trailer hitch, or you can use the J hook or the small hook around the ball of the trailer hitch. So, and then you see it in the middle slide where it's hooked up under the SUV, hooked on both lower control arms. So it took away some of the cumbersome of the single J, which is, ours are either 6 foot long or 8 foot long. So there's a lot of chain there that can be accessed. Too much chain. Sometimes some operators might get confused, especially when they get excited over what's going on. So we developed that chain. It works pretty good. Might be something that other people want to use. We had ours manufactured by a vendor, DOT. So it doesn't eliminate the use of us using the single J. We still use it when we upright vehicles. It doesn't eliminate the use of our heavy-duty chain, which we call a logging chain, where we pull tractor trailers and things like that with it, big vehicles. So just like everybody else, we don't have a lot of claims on something where we're dragging it out of the road, pushing it out of the road, because we're covered under tort liability as well. Occasionally we do have the irate motorist that doesn't want to move. Most of the time, as soon as you let them know that state trooper's on the way, they'll go ahead and let you get it out of the way. So that's pretty much it on that chain right there. If there are any questions.
All right. Well, thanks a bunch. Thanks a bunch there, Jeff. I guess waiting to see here if. Okay. So Michael's asking: is the chain used for a dead drag or a neutral pull?
We're going to drag it. It's in park. It's going to be a dead drag. So if we're pulling something, we want some distance between us and them. So most of the time we don't pull a car or a vehicle. We're going to drag it. if it's a commercial vehicle, we will pull it because it's a professional driver in there. He kind of knows what we're looking for after we explain it to him.
All right. All right. I will not seeing any other questions popping in here, so I think I will hand it over to Sam or Liz if she's feeling any better. Sorry, Liz, you sound horrible. I hope you feel better. I think we'll decide on the next session topic.
Thanks, John. Feeling a little bit better, but I don't sound great. But yes, we are going to take a look at the next session topic. So I'm opening a poll for you all here. You can see the live votes. And the question is for you. What would you like us to tackle on the next session? The next session will be in the new year. We have several options here. The first is emergency response classification. So how is your patrol classified, and what rights do they have on the road? We've looked at what type of lights vehicles have had. We could look at how they're viewed in terms of the move over law. So there's a lot of opportunity. Oh, sorry there. I'm not sure what happened there. Sorry, if you could vote again. I'm not sure how that poll got ended. So that's emergency response classification. The next would be working with other first responders, so taking a look at some best practices. We saw some chat today about working with towers. We could include those as part of this discussion as well, but also working with police, fire, EMS. How do you coordinate on a scene? How do you train together? All that goes into working with other first responders while you're out in the incident scene. And then standard operating procedures would be another option. This is one that we actually explored as one of our very first topics when we first started these sessions. So we can take a look back, see what might have been refreshed, hear from some different states about standard operating procedures. Performance measures is another one that we've looked at before, but how are you measuring performance? We heard from Scott a little bit earlier today about how they work with the University of Maryland to track and analyze their statistics. What measures are you all looking at for your patrols? How do you know when the patrol services are worthwhile? How do you demonstrate value to policymakers? And, you know, at what point does the quantitative versus qualitative metrics come into play? I can take a closer look at that. For training, exactly how it sounds. How do you go about training? We heard a little bit about on-the-job training today. Colorado does mostly on-the-job training, but there are a lot of best practices. I know there's some new training tracks that are being put into place across the country, so we could dive a little bit deeper into training. Funding doesn't seem to be a popular one here with this audience, but funding is just really as it sounds. How do you pay for the safety patrols? How do you get the budget necessary to support different vehicles or different equipment or new enhancements? We saw the swivel arrow board on the truck. You know, how do you go about funding something like that? How do you get the appropriate funding to add those types of new advanced technologies to your patrol? And so we could dive a little bit deeper into funding. And then safety service patrol technologies. What technologies should you be looking at? What's new out there? What are people adding to their programs? What types of tools and equipment are they including? What are you seeing in the truck? What are you seeing used outside of the truck? And then we're always interested. You know, these are just topics that we know have been of interest in the past or have been raised to us while we're at conferences or having different discussions over the phone with contacts in the industry. But certainly we're not covering every single topic and theme available or of interest to you all. So please, in the chat room, feel free to enter in any options that you would also like to see us pursue. You'll certainly see it on a future survey, and we'll get some votes going as well. So we'll give it a little bit, another minute or so, but certainly please vote. What you vote for will be what the next topic is. So push, pull, drag methods was the selected topic for our last session, at the end of our last session, and so that's what we're going to pursue. This network, we said it at the beginning, but I'll repeat again, this network is for you all. It's to share best practices across the industry and make sure that we are sharing more and more. I love Eric's invitation to do more on-site visits. I think that's a great opportunity there as well. So I'll give it another minute here, and then we'll close this poll, and I'll turn it to Sam for closing the call. So thank you all.
Well, as you said, this topic was chosen last time on this survey, and I have to confess, when I saw that was what was chosen. I didn't know how we would fill 2 hours. I kind of figured the answer was in the name: push, pull, or drag it. To me, you know, there's your options. But there really, really a lot of good information on this call. I learned a lot, and we had a lot of new attendees as well. I saw at one point we were up to 72 people on the call. So hopefully those of you that joined us for the first time found it valuable. We are wide open for feedback on how to improve this process. It's really, as we've said all along, this is really your process. Liz and I are just trying to facilitate it. So help us to help you. Let us know what you like to see. Certainly by voting here, I don't see we're anywhere close to 60-some votes. So if you haven't already, tell us what you want to talk about next time, or enter a new topic, a different topic that you want to see, and it'll show up on the next poll after our next call. So wide open to hear from you, and love for you to invite others to this call. That's how I think it's grown to this point. There's not really a sophisticated marketing plan here. It's pretty much word of mouth. So if you found it valuable, either invite others within your organization, or preferably even other states that maybe you work with, neighboring states that you didn't see on the call here. A lot of chat, a lot of back and forth in the discussion. I think that's fantastic. That's really what this is for you guys to share with each other. So thank you for doing that. Before we close here, if anybody has anything they want to add to this call, John McClellan did such a great job moderating for us. So John, if you had anything that you wanted to wrap up with, or any of the presenters have anything else they want to add?
Thank you to everybody for being part of this, and I can't believe we're at number 14, and we've been doing this for a few years. This is exactly what I was hoping we get, and I hope we get even better. So thank you to everybody. It's very good info that was shared.
Thank you, John. If we don't have your email, we do send out emails with reminders of the next events and some follow-ups from this one. If we don't have your email for some reason, please add it before you sign off, or send an email to us, and we'd gladly get you on our mailing list, which is basically just email reminders of upcoming topics and surveys that we want your input. So that's how this works. Thank you, Nilo, for helping us get it on the air today. Thank you, Liz, for all you do to make this such a success. John, I love when you moderate. I learn a lot from you. Thank you to our presenters as well. I hope everybody, first of all, stays safe, and most important, what you all do, but have a wonderful holiday, and we'll do this again in the new year. I look forward to